The dust tasted of iron and drought. Lila Hart pressed her cracked lips together, squinting against the dawn light that sliced across Thunder Rim Ranch like a blade. The New Mexico Territory sun had no mercy, even at daybreak. She shifted the worn leather satchel on her shoulder, its weight familiar as her own shadow, and studied the weathered buildings before her. The ranch house squatted low against the earth, built to withstand wind and time. Its adobe walls had faded to the color of old bone, and the wooden shutters hung slightly askew, as if the place had given up on appearances. Beyond it, a windmill creaked in the morning breeze, its blades turning lazy circles against a sky already bleached of color. "You the one asking after work?" The voice came from her left, deep and cautious. Lila turned to find a man emerging from the barn's shadow. Boone Calder stood tall and lean, carved down to essentials by hard living. His face bore the permanent squint of someone who'd spent too many years reading the horizon, and his hands, she noticed, were scarred from rope and wire. He wore his solitude like armor, visible in the careful distance he kept between them. "I am," Lila kept her voice steady, "professional. I can cook, clean, mend what needs mending. I work hard and keep to myself." Boone's gray eyes moved over her, not with the hungry look she'd learned to guard against, but with the practical assessment of a man calculating costs. Her dress was clean but faded, mended with small, precise stitches. Her hands showed the calluses of honest work. Whatever she was running from, and women didn't arrive alone at remote ranches without running from something she knew how to earn her keep. "Room and board, plus $2 a week," he said finally. "You'll cook 3 meals, keep the house, help with washing. No questions asked, none answered. That suit you?" "It suits me fine." He nodded once. The deal struck. "Dusty'll show you around." As if summoned by his name, an older man ambled out of the barn. Dusty Cole moved with the careful economy of someone whose bones remembered every fall from every horse. His face was a map of sun-carved lines, but his blue eyes held a gentleness that made Lila's throat tight with unexpected emotion. "Welcome to Thunder Rim, miss," Dusty said, touching the brim of his hat. "Not much to look at, but she's honest land. Holds water good in the deep wells. Grows grass enough for cattle. Been in the Calder family since before the war." Lila followed him toward the house, aware of Boone watching their progress before disappearing back into the barn. The kitchen door stuck, requiring Dusty's shoulder to convince it open. Inside, the air hung thick with neglect. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light from the single window, and the cast-iron stove squatted cold and black in the corner. "Been just us menfolk for near on 3 years now," Dusty explained, apologetic. "Since Boone's mama passed, we make do, but—" He gestured helplessly at the state of things. Lila surveyed the battlefield of unwashed dishes, the grease-darkened walls, the floor that hadn't seen a proper scrubbing in months. She'd seen worse. She'd lived worse. "I'll need water heated and some strong lye soap. Can you manage that?" "Yes, ma'am." Dusty's relief was palpable. "I'll get right on it." Alone, Lila set down her satchel and rolled up her sleeves. The motion was automatic, practiced, but she froze as the fabric pulled back. The bruises had faded to yellow-green shadows, ghost prints of fingers that had gripped too hard for too long. She yanked the sleeves down quick, heart hammering, old habits. Seth was 200 miles and another life away. He couldn't find her here. Her fingers went to the locket at her throat, pressing its cool silver surface. Never opened, never would be. Some doors were better left closed. By the time Dusty returned with the water, she'd already begun sorting through the chaos. They worked in companionable silence, him hauling and heating water, her attacking years of grime with fierce determination. The rhythm of work settled her nerves. This was something she could control, something she could fix. "You come from far?" Dusty asked eventually, casual as discussing weather. "Far enough." He nodded, understanding the boundary. Well, you're here now. That's what matters. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth to pottery hardness. Through the kitchen window, Lila watched Boone working on a section of fence. He moved with mechanical precision, driving posts deep, stretching wire taut, a man building barriers against the world. By noon, the kitchen smelled of lye soap and possibility. She'd found flour in the pantry, weevily but serviceable once sifted, lard too, and dried beans, enough to make a start. She mixed cornbread batter while beans simmered, the familiar action soothing as prayer. Something smells like heaven. Dusty appeared in the doorway, wonder in his voice. Hasn't smelled like that since Mrs. Calder passed. Boone finished, entering behind him. He'd washed at the pump outside, droplets still clinging to his dark hair. His expression remained guarded, but something in his eyes had shifted, seeing the transformation of the kitchen. Lila set the meal on the table without ceremony. Beans, cornbread, coffee strong enough to float horseshoes. Basic food, but hot and plentiful. The men ate in focused silence, the kind that spoke of too many cold meals eaten standing up. "This is fine," Boone said finally. The words pulled from him reluctant as splinters. "Real fine." After the meal, the men returned to their work, and Lila continued her assault on the house. Room by room, she pushed back the neglect in what must have been Mrs. Calder's parlor. She found yellowed curtains that crumbled at her touch. The bedroom Dusty showed her small. Barely more than a cell held a narrow bed and a washstand. It was enough, more than enough. It had a door that locked. As afternoon shadows lengthened, she ventured to the well. The windmill groaned overhead, pulling water from deep in the earth. The bucket came up cold and clear, tasting of minerals and depth. This was what mattered here, water. Everything else was secondary to this liquid treasure. "Takes some getting used to." She startled, nearly dropping the ladle. Boone stood a careful distance away, hat in hand. "The water," he clarified. "It's got iron in it. Good for the cattle, though." "I've drunk worse." His eyes searched her face, looking for something. What he found there seemed to satisfy him, or perhaps worry him. Hard to tell with a man who'd practiced being stoned for so long. "Town's about 5 miles east," he said. "Dry Creek, every other Saturday. Dusty takes the wagon in for supplies. You're welcome to ride along. Get what you need for the house." "And if I prefer to stay here?" Something flickered across his features. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "Then you stay. Your choice." The word choice hung between them like a promise. When was the last time anyone had offered her one of those? That evening, after another simple meal, Lila stood on the narrow porch watching the sun bleed out across the horizon. The ranch stretched endlessly in all directions, an ocean of sage and buffalo grass. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes began their evening chorus. The sound should have been lonely. Instead, it felt like freedom. Miss Hart. She turned to find Boone holding something, a knife in a worn leather sheath, and beside it, a pair of work gloves that looked new. "For the work," he said, setting them on the porch rail. "The gloves'll save your hands. The knife's good for kitchen work, but sharp enough for whatever else might need cutting." The unspoken words hung heavy. He'd noticed the bruises. Then, of course he had. Men who survived in this hard country noticed everything. But he offered no questions, no judgment, just tools for defending herself. "Thank you." The words came out rougher than intended. He touched his hat brim and retreated to the barn, where a lantern soon glowed in the loft window, standing guard. She realized, making sure she felt safe on her first night. Inside the house, Lila unpacked her few belongings: 2 dresses, undergarments mended past respectability, a Bible she never read but couldn't bear to abandon. Her fingers touched the locket again, that cold reminder of choices made and unmade. Tomorrow she'd hang new curtains, yellow ones if she could manage it. She'd plant a kitchen garden out back where the windmill's overflow kept the ground damp. She'd make this place livable. Not because she planned to stay forever was a word she'd learned not to trust, but because the work itself was a form of prayer. Each swept floor, each mended hem, each meal set on a clean table was a small victory against chaos. The wind picked up as full dark fell, rattling the loose shutters. But inside, the house felt different already. Still cold, still carrying the weight of loneliness, but the smell of fresh cornbread lingered in the air like a promise of better things. Lila Hart had arrived at Thunder Rim Ranch carrying nothing but ghosts and determination. What she'd found was a place that asked no questions, 2 men as damaged and careful as herself, and just the possibility of peace. Outside, the windmill creaked its endless circle, pulling life from the depths of the earth, and in her small room with its door that locked, Lila finally let her shoulders drop their burden, if only for the night. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. There would be town gossip to navigate. The suspicious eyes of good Christian women who'd wonder what kind of female took up residence with 2 bachelor men. There would be the constant fear that Seth might somehow track her here, that the past she'd fled would catch up despite the miles. But tonight, she was safe. Tonight, she had work for her hands and a roof overhead and the quiet protection of men who understood the value of silence. It wasn't much, perhaps, but it was more than she'd dared hope for when she'd stepped off that stage in Albuquerque with nothing but determination and a handful of saved coins. Thunder Rim Ranch sat beneath its ocean of stars, isolated and weather-beaten, but standing firm against the endless wind. Much like the people who'd found their way here, it endured not through beauty or grace, but through sheer stubborn refusal to yield. And in the kitchen, already cleaner than it had been in years, the last embers of the stove glowed like tiny promises in the dark. The well bucket fought her grip, heavy with morning water. Lila braced her feet against the packed earth, hauling hand over hand, when her sleeve caught on the rough rope. The fabric tore, sliding back past her elbow, and time seemed to stop. The bruises had faded, but their ghosts remained 5 perfect fingerprints wrapped around her forearm like a shackle of yellow-green memory. She heard Boone's footsteps halt behind her, felt the air change as surely as if lightning had struck. "Let me," his voice came out strangled, furious. She jerked the sleeve down, but too late. "I can manage." "I said let me." But he wasn't reaching for the bucket. His hands clenched at his sides, knuckles white, and the rage in his eyes wasn't directed at her. It was older, deeper, aimed at something beyond this moment. Lila released the rope. Stepping back, she'd seen anger before, knew its shapes and temperatures, but this was different. This was the controlled fury of a man who'd learned to bank his fires rather than let them consume everything in reach. Boone hauled the bucket up in 3 violent pulls, water sloshing over the rim. When he set it down, his movements had regained their careful precision, but she could still see the tremor in his hands. "That won't happen here." The words came out flat, final. "Not on my land, not under my roof." She wanted to say it was old damage, that Seth was miles and months away, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she picked up the bucket, holding his gaze. "I know." Something passed between them in that look, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of shared damage. Then Boone turned on his heel and strode toward the barn, his spine rigid with suppressed emotion. Lila carried the water inside, hands steadier than her heartbeat, as she worked, kneading dough for the noon meal. She found herself watching through the window. Boone split wood with mechanical precision, each swing of the axe controlled but fierce. Dusty ambled over to him, said something that made Boone's shoulders drop a fraction. The older man's gift for gentling applied to more than horses. It seemed. That evening, after supper, she found a package on her doorstep. Inside a new work shirt, sturdy cotton in practical brown, and a pair of leather work gloves, butter-soft from conditioning. No note, none needed. She wore both the next day. 3 days later, the piece shattered with the rattle of wagon wheels. Lila looked up from the kitchen garden. She'd started to see a buggy approaching, black as a crow against the pale road. The woman holding the reins sat ramrod straight, her dark dress and severe bonnet marking her as surely as a brand. Agnes Whitlow had arrived. "You must be the woman." Agnes didn't wait for invitation, sweeping into the kitchen like righteousness itself. Her sharp eyes catalogued everything: the cleaned surfaces, the fresh curtains Lila had sewn from fabric found in the attic, the bread cooling on the windowsill. "I'm the housekeeper. Yes, Lila Hart." "I know who you are." Agnes's tone suggested this was not a point in Lila's favor. "What I don't know is what kind of woman takes up residence with two unmarried men, miles from proper supervision." Lila continued rolling out pie crust, keeping her movements calm. "The kind who needs honest work." "Honest?" Agnes sniffed. The word curdled with doubt. "Miss Hart, I feel it's my Christian duty to warn you. This arrangement has the appearance of impropriety. People talk. People always do." Agnes's face flushed. "Perhaps where you come from, reputation doesn't matter. But in Dry Creek, we maintain certain standards. I've come to offer you respectable employment in town. The hotel needs a laundress. It would be more suitable. I have suitable employment. Living with men unchaperoned." Agnes leaned forward, voice dropping to scandal's whisper. "My dear, what will people think?" The door opened before Lila could respond. Boone filled the doorframe, hat in hand but authority in every line of his body. He didn't speak, just stood there like a wall between Agnes and Lila. "Mr. Calder," Agnes straightened, discomfited. "I was just explaining to Miss Hart." "I heard." His voice could have frozen July. "Miss Hart's employment here is proper and permanent, unless you've got ranch business. Mrs. Whitlow, I'll see you to your buggy." Agnes sputtered, gathered her righteousness like skirts, and swept toward the door. "I'm only trying to help, but mark my words, no good comes from ignoring propriety. The Lord sees all." Then he sees Miss Hart working honest and being treated respectful. Boone said, "Good day, ma'am." He walked Agnes to her buggy, stood watching until the dust of her departure settled. When he returned, Lila was pressing designs into the pie crust edge with fork tines, each mark precise as stitches. "She means well," Lila said quietly. "In her way. She means to judge what she don't understand." Boone hung his hat on the peg by the door the first time he'd done so. She realized, making himself at home in his own kitchen. "Your business is your own, Miss Hart, but if anyone troubles you in town, you tell me or Dusty." "I can handle myself." "I know you can." He moved to the stove, poured coffee with careful movements. "But you shouldn't have to, not alone, not anymore." The words hung between them like a promise, or maybe a question. Before Lila could parse their meaning, bootsteps on the porch announced Dusty's arrival. "Trouble brewing," the older man said without preamble. "Mason Pike's in town. Brought 2 surveyors with him." Boone's expression hardened. "Railroad business?" "Water business. They're measuring flow rates along Willow Creek, talking about optimal placement for depot wells." Dusty accepted the cup Lila offered, nodding his thanks. "Sheriff Tate says Pike's got papers from the territorial office. Provisional water rights for railroad development." "The hell he does. My father filed on that watershed in '61. "I know it, you know it, but Pike's got lawyers who can make papers say whatever they want." Dusty's weathered face creased with worry. "He's already got the Hendricks place locked up. Bought out their water rights for pennies after their well went dry last summer." Lila watched the men's exchange, understanding flowing beneath the words. Water was life here. Control the water, control everything. Can he do that, just take it? "Not take," Boone said grimly. "Buy, pressure, manipulate until selling seems like the only choice. Then the railroad owns the water, charges what they please for access. Seen it happen in Colorado, Kansas. Whole towns dried up and blown away. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. Through her small window, she watched clouds build on the horizon, promising rain that would likely never fall. This land was hard enough without men making it harder, squeezing profit from necessity. She rose before dawn, starting bread and setting beans to soak. When Boone appeared, she had coffee ready, strong and black. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." She set a cup before him. "This water business, is it serious?" He stared into the dark liquid like it might hold answers. "Everything about water out here is serious. But yes, Pike doesn't make social calls. If he's surveying, he means to move." "And your father's papers?" "Somewhere in that mess of a study. Haven't had cause to dig them out since he died." Something flickered across his face. Guilt. Maybe. Or grief. Should have kept better track. "We'll find them," Lila said, surprising herself with the "we." "After breakfast, I'll help look." Boone studied her. That careful assessment she was learning to read. Whatever he saw seemed to settle something in him. All right. The study was a tomb of dust and memory. Papers towered in unstable pyramids, and leather-bound ledgers competed for space with ammunition boxes and tack that had no business being indoors. Boone stood in the doorway like a man facing his own gallows. "Father wasn't much for organization," he said unnecessarily. "Most men aren't." Lila tied her hair back with a strip of calico, rolled up her sleeves. "We'll start with the desk, work outward. Water rights would be legal documents, probably sealed or notarized." They worked in silence, broken only by rustling paper and Boone's occasional muttered curse. Lila learned the shape of the Calder family through receipts and correspondence cattle sales. Seed orders. A boys' school report card marked excellent in mathematics. Needs improvement in deportment. "That'd be me," Boone said, almost smiling. "Never could sit still in school." "I can't imagine you as a boy." "Probably best. I was nothing but knees in trouble." He set aside another stack of receipts. "What about you? Much schooling?" "Some. Enough to read and figure." She didn't mention the nights teaching herself from borrowed books. The hunger for words that gnawed worse than empty belly. "My mother believed in education. Said it was the only thing nobody could take from you." "Smart woman." "She was—" They returned to searching, but the silence felt different now, warmer. When their hands brushed reaching for the same ledger, neither pulled away as quick as they might have. "Here." Boone's voice cracked with discovery. From beneath a stack of cattle breeding records, he pulled an oilskin packet. Inside, papers bearing official seals and his father's careful signature. Water rights to the eastern watershed, including exclusive use of 3 springs and seasonal streams, filed proper with the territorial office in Santa Fe. "Thank God," Lila breathed, then, realizing she'd spoken aloud, I know what you mean." Boone's hand covered hers briefly, warm and calloused. "This ranch would die without that water. We'd all have to move on." The thought sat cold in Lila's stomach. Moving on was what she'd done her whole life. The idea of staying, of defending something worth keeping that was new as morning. A commotion in the yard broke the moment. They hurried outside to find Dusty holding the reins of a lathered horse. Its rider slumped forward in the saddle. "It's young Tim Henderson," Dusty called. "Says there's trouble at their place." The boy, maybe 14, straightened enough to gasp out his message. "Mr. Pike's men. They dammed up the creek. Say we can't water the cattle without paying. Pa tried to argue and they knocked him down. Ma sent me to fetch the sheriff. But I saw your smoke closer." Boone's face went granite hard. "Dusty, ride for Sheriff Tate. Tell him what's happening." He turned to the boy. "Can you lead me back?" "Yes, sir." "I'm coming too," Lila said. "No." The word came sharp. This could get ugly. "Then you'll need someone who can doctor if it does." She was already moving toward the house. "I'll get supplies." When she emerged with a basket of bandages and medicines, Boone was saddling his horse, movements quick and economical. He looked at her bundle, at her face, and something shifted in his expression. "You always this stubborn." "When I need to be." "Mount up, then, but you stay back if there's shooting." They rode hard across the broken country, Tim Henderson leading despite his exhaustion. The sun climbed brutal overhead, and dust devils danced across their path like warnings. The Henderson place squatted in a valley where Willow Creek should have run clear and cold. Instead, a crude dam of logs and rocks choked the flow to a trickle. Two men lounged in its shade, rifles prominent. "That's far enough. Calder," one called. "This is railroad property now." "Like hell it is." Boone's voice carried clear across the distance. "That's Henderson water. Has been for 15 years. Not anymore, mister. Pike bought the rights fair and square. Henderson wants water. He can pay for it like anyone else." Lila saw movement by the house missus. Henderson helping her husband to the porch. Blood stained his shirt collar. "I'm going to the house," she told Boone quietly. "To help." "Lila!" "They won't shoot a woman. Too much paperwork." She nudged her horse forward before he could protest, riding at an angle that kept her clear of direct fire lines. The men watched her progress, uncertain. "Afternoon, Mrs. Henderson," she called pleasantly, as if armed men weren't holding the family's water hostage. "I'm Lila Hart from Thunder Rim. Brought some supplies that might help." She dismounted smooth and easy, keeping her movements calm. Behind her, she heard Boone still talking, his voice level but firm. She couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear negotiation backed by steel. "Mister." Henderson had a gash above his eye and bruised ribs, but nothing broken. Lila cleaned and bandaged while Mrs. Henderson held his hand, her face carved from worry and rage. "They came at dawn," the woman whispered. "Said we'd signed papers, sold our rights, but we never did, never would." "I believe you," Lila said. A shot cracked across the valley, and everyone froze, but it was aimed at sky, not flesh a warning. Through the window, she saw Sheriff Tate arriving with Dusty and several townsmen. The numbers had shifted. Pike's men looked less certain now, outnumbered and far from their boss's protection. The standoff ended not with violence, but with paper. Sheriff Tate examined the supposed bill of sale, held it to the light, finally shook his head. "This is forged worse than Confederate money. You boys best tear down that dam and ride on out." They complied with poor grace, watched by armed citizens who'd remembered that they, too, depended on free-flowing water. The dam came apart easier than it went up, and Willow Creek ran free again, muddy at first, then clear. "This isn't over," one of Pike's men promised as they mounted up. "Mister, Pike don't forget." "Neither do we," Boone replied. The ride back to Thunder Rim was quiet, each lost in thought. As they unsaddled the horses, Boone finally spoke. "You did good today, keeping calm, helping the Hendersons." "I've had practice staying calm when men get violent." He went still, then, very carefully, continued loosening the saddle girth. "That why you carry that locket reminder of what you're staying calm about?" Lila's hand went automatic to her throat. "Something like that." "Don't have to tell me." He hefted the saddle, turned to face her. "But Lila, whatever you're running from, it won't find you here. Not while I'm standing." The promise in his words made her throat tight. She managed a nod, not trusting her voice. That evening, as purple shadows stretched long across the ranch, she stood at the kitchen window watching Boone repair the north fence. His movements were steady, patient, the kind of work that built things to last. Dusty sat on the porch, whittling and humming tunelessly, keeping easy watch. For the first time in memory, Lila felt the tight knot in her chest begin to loosen. Not much trust was too hard-earned for that, but enough to breathe deeper, enough to imagine that maybe, possibly, she'd found more than just a job at Thunder Rim Ranch. She'd found a place where damaged people could heal, where silence was respect instead of threat, where a man's promise meant something more than pretty words. The water in the kitchen bucket reflected the last light of day, clear despite its iron taste. Like everything else here, it was hard-won but honest. And for now, that was enough. Lila touched the locket once, habit and talisman, then let her hand fall. Whatever ghosts it held would keep. Tonight, there was bread to make for tomorrow, clothes to mend, a life to build one careful stitch at a time. Outside, Boone's hammer rang against wood, steady as heartbeat. The sound followed her into evening chores, a rhythm of building instead of breaking. And if sometimes she paused to listen, to feel that steady beat like a promise of permanence, well, that was her secret to keep. For now, the change came subtle as morning light. First, the kitchen curtain's yellow calico that caught sunrise and held it. Then small things, a rag rug by the door, wildflowers in a mason jar, the smell of baking bread replacing years of bachelor neglect. Thunder Rim Ranch was waking up under Lila's careful hands. Boone noticed, though he said nothing. She'd catch him sometimes, standing in a doorway, taking in the differences with an expression she couldn't read. Wonder, maybe, or the careful hope of a man who'd learned not to trust good things to stay. The garden grew despite the drought. Lila hauled water morning and evening, coaxing life from soil baked hard as pottery. Beans climbed poles made from old fence posts. Squash vines sprawled protective over precious earth. Even a few stubborn tomatoes set fruit, green promises against the dust. "Never seen anybody make things grow like that," Dusty marveled, accepting a glass of water flavored with wild mint she'd found by the creek. "My mama had the touch, but this land's gotten meaner since her time." "Everything wants to live," Lila said, pruning dead leaves with the knife Boone had given her. "Just needs a reason to try." Dusty's blue eyes went thoughtful. "Reckon that's true for more than plants?" 3 weeks into her residence, the town came calling again. Not Agnes this time, but 3 cowboys from the Double Bar Ranch, whiskey brave and looking for trouble. Lila was alone. Hanging wash. When they rode up, well, the mystery woman herself. The leader, a thick-necked man with mean eyes, swung down from his horse. "Boy's been taking bets on what kind of woman moves in with Boone Calder. The kind who has work to do." Lila kept her voice steady, hands still on the wet shirt she was pinning. "Ranch business is down at the barn. Our business is right here." He moved closer, his friends flanking him. "See, we figure a woman who'd live like this might be friendly, might appreciate some company." The kitchen door slammed open. Boone stood there, rifle casual in his hands but ready. He didn't speak, didn't threaten, just stood there like a wall between them and Lila. The cowboys sobered fast. The leader tried to swagger it out. "Just being neighborly. Calder." "Get gone." 2 words, flat as hammered iron. The men exchanged glances, calculated odds, and decided discretion was the better part of valor. They mounted up, the leader throwing back over his shoulder. "This ain't over. Woman like that brings trouble." After they left, Boone set the rifle aside, his movements very controlled. "You hurt?" "No, they were just talking big." "They were doing more than that." His jaw worked like he was chewing nails. "You should have done exactly what you did." Lila surprised herself by touching his arm. "You didn't escalate, didn't give them excuse to come back with more men. That was smart." He looked at her hand on his arm like it was something miraculous. "My father would have shot first." "Your father's dead." The blunt words hung between them. Then Boone laughed, short and sharp. "That he is, and I'm trying not to follow him there." That night at supper, the mood stayed heavy. Dusty tried to lighten it with stories, but even his gift for yarn spinning couldn't quite lift the shadow. Finally, he set down his fork. "We need to talk straight. This situation Lila living here, it's causing ripples. Not her fault," he added quickly. But people are people, and they talk. Let them talk, Boone growled. It's not that simple. Son, Mason Pike's using it, stirring the pot, saying if you can't run a proper household, how can you run a ranch? Saying maybe the railroad would be better stewards of the water rights. Lila felt her appetite vanish. I could go. Find work in another town? No! Boone's fist hit the table, making dishes jump. He took a breath, moderated his tone. No, you're not running because of wagging tongues. This is your home now, if you want it. Even if it makes things harder for you. He met her eyes straight on. Some things are worth the hard. Wind rattled the windows, and Dusty rose to check the stock. Alone, Boone and Lila sat in lamplight, the kitchen warm around them. I was married once, Boone said suddenly. When I was young, 20, full of fire and foolishness. She was bright like a flame, couldn't bear the isolation out here, the wind and the work. Left after 8 months, went back east. Divorce papers came a year later. Lila absorbed this, understanding the gift of the confidence. Did you love her? Thought I did. Maybe I loved the idea of her more than the woman herself. He turned his coffee cup in circles, a nervous gesture she'd never seen from him. Learn something, though. Love ain't enough if you're not suited, if you can't be partners in the daily work of living. No, she agreed softly. It's not. They sat in companionable silence until Dusty returned, bringing news that changed everything. Spotted campfires out by Rattlesnake Ridge. 3, maybe 4. And Johnny Morales rode by. Said there's a bounty hunter in town asking questions. Looking for a woman traveling alone, late 20s, dark hair. Says her husband's offering good money for information. Ice filled Lila's veins. Seth, somehow, he'd found her trail. Her hand went to the locket, pressing hard enough to hurt. This husband, Boone said carefully, eyes never leaving her face. He likely to come himself. Eventually. Her voice came out steady, surprising her. Seth don't like losing what he considers his. And do you consider yourself his? I consider myself free. Have since the night I left Texas with his blood on my kitchen floor and his money in my pocket. The words spilled out like water through a broken dam. He beat me for 3 years, said it was his right as a husband. Last time, he went too far. I fought back, took a skillet to his head, left him breathing but not by much, took what cash he had and ran. Been running since. The kitchen went silent except for the wind. Then Boone stood, walked to the window, stared out at darkness. You kill him. No, wanted to. Lord help me, I wanted to, but I just knocked him cold and ran. Good. He turned back, and his face held something fierce and protective. Means when he comes, I can deal with him without the law interfering. Man's got a right to protect his property. I'm not property. No, but this ranch is, and you're under its protection. That makes you mine to defend. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, she felt something unknot in her chest. Not owned, but claimed. Protected. There was a difference, vast as the space between prison and home. Days passed tense with waiting. Lila went armed now, the knife always at her belt. She'd caught Dusty teaching her to shoot behind the barn, patient with her flinches at the noise. Boone said nothing, but ammunition appeared on her dresser, and a small pistol that fit her hand. The bounty hunter left town without answers. Agnes Whitlow might disapprove of Lila, but she disapproved more of men hunting women like animals. Sheriff Tate made it clear that without proof of a crime, he wouldn't aid in dragging anyone back to Texas. The frontier had its own justice, and sometimes that meant letting people disappear into its vastness. But the campfires on Rattlesnake Ridge remained. Could be anybody, Dusty said, but his hand stayed close to his gun. Drifters, maybe, or survey crew for the railroad. Or Seth's men, waiting for the bounty hunter to point the way. Lila said bluntly, I won't bring danger to you. If they're his, If they're his, they'll learn what it means to threaten what's ours. Boone cut her off. You're not facing this alone. Not anymore. That night, the wind changed. Dusty sniffed the air like an old hound, frowning. Santa Ana wind's coming. Early this year means fire danger if anyone's careless with their campfires. The winds arrived at dawn, hot and dry from the desert, sucking moisture from everything they touched. The garden wilted despite extra water. The horses grew restless. Even the chickens huddled in whatever shade they could find. By afternoon, the temperature had climbed past endurable. Lila worked in the kitchen, sweat running despite the opened windows. She was rolling out pie crust when she heard the sound of a single horse, riding hard. Through the window, she saw a rider approaching, slumped in the saddle. Her heart seized until she recognized the slight figure Tim Henderson, the boy from the water dispute. "Fire!" he gasped as Boone caught his horse's reins. "Rattlesnake Ridge is burning, wind's pushing it this way." Lila ran outside in time to see the smoke column rising black against the pale sky. Even from miles away, she could see the orange glow at its base. With these winds, it would race across the dry grass like death itself. "How long?" Boone demanded. 2 hours, maybe less if the wind picks up. Boone's face went grim. "Dusty, ride to town. Get every man who can carry a shovel. Tim, water your horse and get home. Warn everyone along the way." He turned to Lila. "Start soaking everything you can. Blankets, feed sacks, anything that'll hold water. We'll make our stand at the creek line." The next hours blurred into desperate action. Men arrived from town, faces set with shared purpose. Water rights meant nothing if everything burned. They worked together, cutting fire breaks, soaking the ground, preparing for battle. Lila worked alongside them, hauling water until her hands bled, soaking blankets until her skirts were sodden. When the fire crowned the ridge, racing down toward them like the wrath of God, she felt fear dry as dust in her throat. "Here it comes!" someone shouted. The fire hit their line in a roar of heat and hunger. Men beat at flames with wet blankets, threw dirt, fought with everything they had. Lila found herself beside Boone, both wielding soaked feed sacks, batting down every spark that tried to jump their break. Her world narrowed to heat and smoke and the rhythm of fighting. Strike, smother, move, strike, smother, move. Her lungs burned. Her eyes streamed. But she didn't stop, couldn't stop. This was her home now, and she'd be damned if she'd let it burn. Time lost meaning in the smoke. Could have been minutes or hours when the wind finally began to shift, turning the fire back on itself. Without fuel, it began to falter, then die, leaving miles of blackened earth in its wake. "We held it," someone said, wonder in their voice. "We actually held it." Men collapsed where they stood, exhausted. Lila found herself sitting in the dirt, Boone beside her. His face was soot black except where sweat had carved channels. He was grinning, fierce and wild. "You're something," he said. "You know that really something." Before she could respond, Dusty approached, his expression troubled despite their victory. "Found something up on the ridge, where the fire started." Campfire, still laid out neat. Whoever lit it meant for it to spread. The implications settled heavy. Someone had deliberately set the fire, knowing the winds would drive it toward Thunder Rim. Seth's men, or Pike's, did it matter? Sheriff Tate examined the evidence. "Jaw tight. Arson's attempted murder out here, E. I find who did this, they'll hang." As the crowd dispersed, Agnes Whitlow approached where Lila sat tending burned hands. The older woman's dress was singed, her face smudged. She'd fought alongside everyone else. "I owe you an apology," Agnes said stiffly. "You fought for this town today. That makes you one of us, regardless of circumstances." It wasn't warm, but it was acknowledgement. Lila nodded, too tired to hold grudges. We all did what was needed. That night, the ranch felt different. The threat of fire had passed. But its lesson remained. They'd survived because they'd stood together ranch and town, proper ladies and improper women, all united against common threat. Boone found Lila on the porch, watching the last smoke wisps rise from the burned land. "Thank you," he said simply, "for fighting, for staying. It's my home too now." "Yes," he agreed, "it is." In the distance, coyotes called to each other across the burned ground, but here, in the circle of light from the kitchen window, Lila felt safe. Whatever came next, Seth, pike, drought, or fire, she wouldn't face it alone. The wind had died to a whisper, and stars emerged one by one above Thunder Rim, each one a promise that some things endured, no matter how fierce the flames that tried to consume them. The coyotes came with the new moon, bold as brass and twice as hungry. Lila heard them first, circling the sheep pen in the dark hours before dawn. She rose silent, pulling on Boone's old work shirt over her nightdress, and took up the axe he'd sharpened for her. The night air bit cold after the day's heat. Stars scattered overhead like spilled salt, and the darkness pressed close beyond the circle of the ranch buildings. The sheep bleated nervous, bunching together in the far corner of their pen. Yellow eyes caught the moonlight, 3, maybe 4 shapes slinking low through the sagebrush. Lila hefted the axe, then brought it down hard on the chopping block. The crack split the night like a gunshot. Once, twice, 3 times, the rhythm sharp and threatening. The coyotes paused, uncertain. Predators, but cautious ones. The sound promised violence, human anger, danger greater than a few sheep were worth. "That's right," she called into the darkness, voice steady. "Move along, nothing for you here." Boot steps behind her, quick but not panicked. Boone appeared, rifle in hand, taking in the scene with one swift glance, instead of pushing her aside. He simply took position at her shoulder, adding his presence to hers. "Smart thinking with the axe," he said quiet. "They'll remember that sound." Together they stood watch until the yellow eyes faded back into darkness, the pack moving onto easier prey. Only then did Lila realize she was shaking not from fear, but from the fierce protectiveness that had driven her outside. These sheep, this ranch, had become hers to defend. "You did good," Boone said, and the approval in his voice warmed her more than any fire. "Could have hidden inside, waited for me or Dusty. They're my responsibility too now." She set the axe aside, rubbing arms gone cold. "The animals, the garden, all of it." Something shifted in his expression, too complex to read in moonlight. "Lila? Best check the henhouse too," she said quickly, not ready for whatever he'd been about to say. "Coyotes might circle back." They walked the perimeter together, checking locks and fences. Working beside him felt natural now, their movements coordinated without need for words. When they'd assured all was secure, they stood by the well, reluctant to return to separate quarters. "My mother used to do that," Boone said suddenly. "Bang pots when the coyotes came. Said the only thing that kept this land civilized was women willing to make noise in the dark." Sounds like a wise woman. "She would have liked you. I think you've got her kind of steel." He paused, then added softer, "I'm glad you're here. Lila, ranch feels more like home again." Before she could respond, he turned toward the barn where he'd been sleeping since she arrived. She watched him go, words tangled in her throat. The space between them felt charged with possibility, dangerous as lightning looking for ground. Dawn brought a different kind of danger. Lila was feeding chickens when she spotted the rider approaching, not the usual loose-limbed cowboys or sturdy ranchers, but a man who sat his horse like a hunter. His clothes were trail-worn but quality, his gear well-maintained, a professional. Her blood went cold. Bounty hunter. Had to be. She forced herself to continue scattering feed, movements casual while her mind raced. The kitchen door stood 20 feet away. The pistol Boone had given her lay in her room. Too far. The knife at her belt would have to do. The rider stopped at the gate, touching his hat brim. "Morning, ma'am. Looking for the Calder spread." "You've found it." She kept her voice neutral, hand resting natural-like near the knife. "Mister, Calder's out with the herd, expected back by noon." It was a lie Boone was in the barn, Dusty with him, but she needed to buy time, gauge this man's intentions. "I'll wait, if that's acceptable." His eyes pale as winter sky, missed nothing. Not her defensive posture, not the well-maintained buildings, not the fresh laundry that spoke of a woman's presence. "Name's Frank Morrison. I have business with Mr. Calder regarding some mutual acquaintances." The way he said acquaintances made her skin crawl. But before she could respond, Dusty emerged from the barn, moving with careful purpose. "Help you, stranger." The old man's voice carried friendly interest, but his hand rested easy on his gun belt. "Mr. Morrison here says he has business with Boone," Lila said, proud when her voice stayed steady. Dusty's eyes sharpened. "That's so. Well, Mr. Morrison, why don't you step down? Water your horse. We can discuss this business proper-like." The bounty hunter dismounted smooth, but Lila caught the slight stiffness that spoke of long days in the saddle. Following someone's trail. Her trail, most likely. "I'll make coffee," she said, needing movement, needing to warn Boone. Inside, she found him already at the window, watching Morrison with the stillness of a man calculating odds. "Bounty hunter?" she asked. "Maybe. Or maybe one of Pike's men playing a deeper game." His jaw worked. "Either way, he's fishing. Don't give him anything to catch." They served coffee on the porch, a parody of hospitality. Morrison sipped appreciative, playing the cordial visitor while his eyes cataloged everything. "Fine place you have here," he said eventually. "Must be challenging, keeping it running with limited hands." "We manage," Boone replied flat. "I imagine an extra pair of hands helps, especially skilled ones." Morrison's gaze slid to Lila. "You seem familiar. Ma'am, have we met?" "I don't recall meeting you, Mr. Morrison." She poured more coffee, hand steady through pure will. "I'm not much for socializing. No, a woman as handsome as yourself must have admirers. Maybe even a husband wondering where she's gone." The air went electric. Boone set down his cup very carefully. "Miss Hart is under my protection. Her past is her business." "Of course." Morrison smiled, all teeth and no warmth. "Just making conversation, though I did hear tell of a man in Texas. Name of Seth Raleigh. Lost his wife some months back, offering good money for information about her whereabouts. They say she's dangerous. Attacked him. Stole from him." "Don't know any Raleighs," Dusty said mild. "Texas is a long way from here." "Indeed it is." Morrison stood, setting his hat precise. "Well, I won't take more of your time. Though if you should happen to remember anything about a woman, late 20s, dark hair, maybe bearing old injuries, there's $500 in it. Gold." After he rode away, they stood silent, watching dust settle in his wake. "He knows," Lila said finally. "Suspects," Boone corrected. "Knowing and proving are different things." "I should go, before he brings others." "You should stay put and let us handle this." The edge in his voice made her look up. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes burned fierce. "You're not running anymore. Remember, this is your ground now. We defend it." That night, she couldn't eat. The locket felt heavy as lead around her neck, its secrets pressing against her chest. After supper, she found herself at the well, staring into its depths like answers might rise with the water. "Want to tell me what's in it?" She startled. Dusty stood nearby, whittling in the last light. "The locket, I mean," he continued, not looking up. "Seen you touch it when you're worried, like it's got weight you're carrying." Lila's hand went automatic to the silver oval. "Just memories." Bad ones. I'd guess kind that keep a person running even when they're standing still. He examined his carving, a horse taking shape from pine. I knew a woman once, kept her wedding ring long after her husband died. Said it reminded her who she used to be, so she could remember who she'd become. The words sat between them, gentle as evening air. Finally, Lila found herself talking. My mother's picture is inside, and my marriage certificate. She laughed bitter. Proof I belong to him. Legal as a bill of sale? I thought if I destroyed it, I'd be free, but I couldn't. Like destroying it would make the whole thing a lie, including the parts where I survived. Dusty nodded slow. Papers don't make a marriage. Love and respect do. Without those, it's just ink and empty promises. Seth never loved me. He loved owning me. Then he never had you. Not true. Can't own what won't be possessed. He handed her the carved horse. Still rough, but recognizable. You're free, Miss Lila. Free as this Mustang. Just gotta believe it yourself. She held the small carving, throat tight with emotion. In the barn, she could hear Boone working, the steady rhythm of hammer on metal, the sound of building, not breaking. 2 days later, Mason Pike arrived with papers. Lila saw them coming Pike in his city suit despite the heat. 2 men who looked more like hired guns than surveyors, and a nervous man clutching a portfolio who must be a lawyer. Stay inside, Boone ordered, checking his rifle. No. She stood beside him on the porch, chin raised. I won't hide. Pike's smile was oily as old bacon. Calder. Ma'am, I have here a provisional water rights claim, duly filed with the territorial government. The railroad requires access to the eastern watershed for development purposes. That watershed's already claimed. Has been since '61. But you see, there's some question about the validity of those old claims. Paperwork gets lost. Signatures fade. Pike's smile widened. Unless, of course, you can produce the original documentation. Boone's stillness was dangerous. You know I can. Do I? Because I've heard tell you've been distracted lately. Taking in strays, fighting fires instead of minding business. His eyes slid to Lila, calculating. A man who can't run a proper household might not be fit to manage water rights for the whole valley. That's enough. Sheriff Tate rode up, badge glinting. He looked tired, caught between law and justice. Pike, you can't just claim water that's already spoken for. I'm not claiming anything. The railroad is simply filing for unused portions of the watershed. If Mr. Calder can prove prior claim to every spring and stream, we'll certainly respect that. He has 10 days to present documentation at the county seat. Otherwise, Pike shrugged, eloquent. After they left, Boone stood rigid, hands fisted. He knows about the old church records. Knows that's where the duplicate papers are kept. Then we get them. Lila said simply, Church has been abandoned 2 years. Roofs half fallen in. Papers could be destroyed. Scattered. Then we'd best start looking. He turned to her then, something raw in his expression. Why you could leave, find work elsewhere. Why stay and fight for this? The answer came without thought. Because this is home. Because you and Dusty gave me sanctuary when I needed it. Because... She stopped, words too dangerous to speak. Because... His voice went soft, closer than before. Because I want to see yellow curtains in every window and vegetables in the garden and children playing by the well someday. The admission hung between them, fragile as spun glass. This place could be that, should be that, if we fight for it. His hand covered hers where it rested on the porch rail. We'll fight then, together. That night, Lila opened the locket for the first time in months. Her mother's face gazed up at her, young and hopeful in faded daguerreotype. Behind it, the marriage certificate. Seth's name scrawled possessive across the bottom. Moving deliberate, she pulled out the certificate, held it to the lamp flame, watched it curl and blacken and turn to ash. The locket felt lighter when she closed it. Still carried memory, but not chains. Tomorrow they'd ride to the abandoned church, search for papers that might save the ranch. Tonight, she was just Lila Hart, free woman, watching stars wheel overhead while somewhere in the barn. Boone worked late, building tomorrow one board at a time. The coyotes called again in the darkness, but she didn't reach for the axe. Some nights, the wild things could sing without threat. Some nights, a woman could stand on a porch she'd scrubbed clean and feel the world settling into place around her, piece by careful piece. The storm came without warning, turning afternoon to twilight in minutes. Lila had been mending harness when the first fat drops hit the barn roof, and within moments, the sky opened like a broken dam. Rain hammered down in sheets, turning the yard to mud, sending chickens squawking for cover. "Where's Boone?" she called to Dusty, who was fighting to secure a loose barn door. Checking the north fence said he'd be back before thunder drowned his words, lightning turning the world white bright for an instant. Lila's stomach clenched. The north fence bordered the arroyo, dry most of the year but deadly when rain like this hit the mountains. Flash floods could sweep down those channels with killing force, taking everything in their path. Without thinking, she grabbed her shawl and plunged into the storm. The rain hit like fists, cold and brutal, soaking through her dress in seconds. Wind tore at her hair, sent it streaming like a banner. She could barely see 10 feet ahead, but she knew the path, had walked it enough times watching Boone work. "Boone!" Her voice vanished in the storm's roar. "Boone!" She found him wrestling with a section of fence that had torn loose, fighting to secure it before the cattle scattered. His shirt plastered to his skin, face set in grim determination as he battled wire and wind. "Get back to the house," he shouted when he saw her. "The arroyo!" She had to scream to be heard. "Flash flood coming!" His head snapped toward the usually dry creek bed. Even through the rain, they could hear it a rumbling like distant thunder that had nothing to do with the storm overhead. Water was coming, a wall of it carrying everything the mountains couldn't hold. They ran, slipping in mud, stumbling over rocks, racing the sound that grew louder with each second. Lila's skirts tangled her legs. She yanked them high, propriety be damned, and ran faster. Boone grabbed her hand, pulling her up a rise just as the flood roared past where they'd been standing. It was terrible and magnificent, a wall of brown water carrying trees, rocks, pieces of someone's fence from miles upstream. The ground shook with its passing. Where the fence had been, where Boone had been working moments before, was nothing but churning destruction. They stood gasping, rain streaming down their faces, hands still clasped tight. Death had passed close enough to breathe on them, and in its wake came a clarity sharp as lightning. Lila, just her name, but the way he said it, relief and fear and something else all tangled together. His free hand came up to push soaked hair from her face, the touch gentle despite his shaking. She caught his hand, held it against her cheek. They stood there in the rain, no words possible or needed, until the immediate danger passed. Then, without discussion, they made their way to the old line shack that stood on higher ground closer than the ranch house and dry. Inside, the single room was dim and dusty but whole. An old stove squatted in the corner, split wood stacked beside it, blankets hung from pegs, musty but serviceable. Boone got a fire going while Lila wrung water from her hair and skirts. "You saved my life," he said quietly, feeding kindling to the growing flames. "If you hadn't come." "Don't," she shivered, arms wrapped around herself. "Just don't think about it." He rose, pulled a blanket from the peg, and wrapped it around her shoulders. His hands lingered there, warm through the wool. "Can't help thinking about how close, about what I almost lost before I ever had it." The air between them changed, charged as the storm outside. Lila turned in the circle of his arms, looking up at him. Rain had darkened his hair, sent drops rolling down the strong planes of his face. His eyes held heat that had nothing to do with the fire. "I need to tell you something," she said, "about Seth." About what our marriage was. You don't have to. I do, because I need you to understand why this is hard for me. Why trusting is. She took a breath, steady as she could make it. On our wedding night, he showed me what kind of man he really was. Showed me I was property, not partner. For 3 years, I lived like that, never knowing kindness, never having choices. When I ran, I swore I'd never give anyone that power again. Boone's jaw worked, his arms tightening careful around her. I'd kill him if he was here. I know, but he's not here, and I'm tired of him being between me and any chance at happiness. She reached up, touched his face. You're not him. Never have been. You gave me work when I needed it, protection without price, respect when the world said I didn't deserve it. You've shown me what a real man is, what real strength is. Lila. His voice broke rough. I'm not good with words. Don't know how to say pretty things. But you've brought my home back to life. Brought me back to life. Every morning I wake up listening for your footsteps in the kitchen. And when I hear them, I know the day's going to be worth something. She rose up on her toes. Decision made. I don't need pretty words. Their lips met soft, tentative, a question asked and answered, then deeper as the storm crashed around them and the fire crackled warm. His hands tangled in her wet hair, and she pressed closer, feeling safe and wanted and whole for the first time in memory. When they pulled apart, both breathing unsteady, she bit her lip, nervous habit from years of fear. But this was different. This was anticipation, not dread. Cowboy, she whispered, echoing something she'd heard the ranch hands say, making it tender instead of teasing. What happens after I undress? His eyes darkened, but his smile was gentle, understanding the gift she was offering not just her body, but her trust, her choice freely given. He cupped her face in work-rough hands, thumbs stroking her cheekbones with reverence. Then you'll know desire, he said simply. The kind that comes from being wanted, not owned. The kind that says you're precious, not property. The kind that stops the second you say stop. Because what matters is what you want too. Tears mixed with rainwater on her cheeks. Show me, please. What followed was gentle as the storm was fierce. Each touch a question, each kiss an answer. When he helped her from her soaked dress, his hands were reverent, not possessive. When she unbuttoned his shirt with trembling fingers, he held still, letting her set the pace. They came together on the narrow cot, blankets cocooning them against the cold. No rush, no force, just the slow, sweet exploration of two people choosing each other. He showed her tenderness she'd never known existed, patience that let her wounded heart begin to trust. She gave him softness he'd thought lost forever, warmth that thawed years of loneliness. Outside, the storm spent itself against the hills. Inside, they lay entwined, listening to rain gentle on the roof. Lila traced patterns on his chest, marveling at the freedom to touch and be touched without fear. I love you, Boone said into the quiet. No, it's too soon to say, but nearly losing you today, I can't hold it back anymore. You don't have to say it back, just need you to know. She pressed her face against his shoulder, feeling words she'd thought killed, trying to resurrect. I think I'm learning to love you too. Give me time. All you need. He pressed a kiss to her hair. We've got nothing but time now. They dozed, woke to touch and whisper, dozed again. The intimacy was more than physical. It was the sharing of souls too long alone. When the rain finally stopped near midnight, neither wanted to move. We should get back, Lila said reluctantly. Dusty will be worried. He'll know we're safe. Man's got sense enough to figure we'd shelter somewhere. But Boone sat up, reaching for his clothes. Though you're right. Can't have people talking more than they already do. They dressed by dying firelight, shy now in the aftermath. But when Boone held out his hand, Lila took it without hesitation. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The walk back revealed the storm's fury. Branches down, New channels carved by water. The north fence completely gone. But the ranch building stood firm, lamplight glowing warm in windows. Dusty met them at the door, relief plain on his weathered face. Thank the Lord. When that flood came down, I feared the worst. We sheltered in the line shack. Boone said simply, "We'll need to rebuild that whole fence line come morning." If Dusty noticed their joined hands, the new ease between them, he kept it to himself, just nodded and headed for his own quarters, leaving them alone on the porch. "Everything's different now," Lila said softly. "Yes," Boone turned her to face him. "But different good. I hope—" "The best different?" She stood on her toes to kiss him, quick but sweet, like the world just got bigger and smaller all at once. He smiled, the expression transforming his usual serious face. "I know what you mean. Now get inside, get warm. Tomorrow's going to be long, putting things right after the storm." But as Lila lay in her narrow bed, she didn't think about tomorrow's work. She thought about strong, gentle hands, about choosing instead of being chosen, about the way desire could heal instead of hurt. Her fingers found the locket, pressed it once, then let it lie. Seth was the past, the ranch, Boone, the life they were building together that was the future. And for the first time since she'd run into the night with blood on her hands and terror in her heart, Lila Hart believed in futures. Outside her window, stars emerged as clouds broke apart. The land lay washed clean, ready for whatever came next. In the barn, she could hear Boone working despite the hour, preparing for morning's labors. The sound no longer spoke of loneliness. Now it sang of partnership, of burdens shared and joys doubled. She fell asleep to that rhythm, safe in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought Pike's threats, Seth's shadow, drought or flood, she wouldn't face it alone. Love had come to Thunder Rim Ranch quiet as rain after drought, and like the desert after storm, everything bloomed in its wake. The work of rebuilding began at first light. Men from town arrived without being asked, bringing tools and timber, their face set with the determined look of people who understood that water rights affected everyone. Even Agnes Whitlow came, her severe black dress replaced by practical calico, sleeves rolled up for work. "Miss Hart," she said stiffly, approaching where Lila was organizing food for the workers. "I owe you better than I've given. You fought fire for this town. Near died in flood warning, folks. That makes you neighbor, whatever else you might be. It wasn't warmth, exactly, but it was acceptance." Lila nodded, hands never pausing in their work. "We all do what's needed, Mrs. Whitlow. That's how it is out here." "Yes." Agnes hesitated, then added quieter. "I was young once, made my own choices that folks didn't understand. Judge not, the good book says, and I forgot that for a time." She moved away before Lila could respond, but the olive branch had been extended. Throughout the morning, other women followed suit, a nod here, a small smile there. Inclusion in conversations that had previously stopped when she approached. Boone worked alongside the men, rebuilding fence and shoring up the creek bank, but his eyes found Lila often. And when their gazes met, the memory of rain and shelter and gentle hands passed between them like whispered promises. "You two set a date yet?" Dusty asked, casual-like, as he helped Lila carry water to the workers. She nearly dropped the bucket. "Dusty Cole. What man's got eyes? Way you two been looking at each other all morning, like the sun rises and sets in each other's faces." He grinned, years falling away from his weathered features. "About time, if you ask me. Ranch needs a proper family again." "We haven't. It's not—" She gave up, feeling heat in her cheeks. "It's complicated. Love always is, but complications pass. What lasts is choosing each other every day, through flood and drought and whatever else comes." He patted her shoulder, gentle. "You two got the choosing part down. Rest'll follow." By afternoon, the immediate damage was repaired. and talk turned to longer solutions. The men gathered in the yard, Boone at their center with the water rights papers spread on a makeshift table. "Way I see it," said Tom Henderson, still bearing bruises from Pike's men. "We got two choices. Fight them separate and lose separate, or band together." "What are you suggesting?" Sheriff Tate asked. "Water cooperative." Boone said, legal-like, with papers filed proper. "We share the water rights, build a common system. Railroad wants water, they deal with all of us, not pick us off one by one." "That's socialist talk," someone muttered. "That's survival talk," Boone countered. "We already share work when there's need barn raisings, harvests, fighting fires. Why not water?" The debate went back and forth, but in the end, practicality won. Papers were drawn up. Signatures gathered. The Dry Creek Water Cooperative was born in Lila's clean kitchen, sealed with coffee and determination. As the crowd dispersed, Lila noticed a lone rider approaching, not the aggressive pace of trouble, but the weary slump of long travel. Her breath caught, then released. Not Seth, a woman, elderly, riding side saddle despite the impracticality. The woman stopped at the gate, studying the ranch with sharp eyes. "I'm looking for Boone Calder." "I'm Calder." Boone stepped forward. "What's your business?" "Family business." She dismounted with surprising grace. "I'm Margaret Calder, your father's sister. I believe it's time we met." The kitchen felt crowded with this new presence. Margaret Calder sat straight-backed, teacup held precise, taking in everything with those sharp eyes so like Boone's. "I heard about the fire," she said, "and the water troubles. News travels, even to Santa Fe." "If you've come about inheritance," Boone started, defensive. "I've come because you're the last family I have, and I'm too old for pride." She set down her cup with a decisive click. "I have money, Boone, more than I need. Your father and I quarreled years ago over nothing worth remembering, and now he's gone and I'm running out of time to make things right." She pulled papers from her traveling case. "I want to invest in this water cooperative. Enough to build proper systems, dig new wells, make sure no railroad can dry you out." Boone stared at the numbers, stunned. It was more than enough. It was salvation. "Why?" he asked finally. "Because family matters. Because I was too proud to say so while my brother lived. And I won't make that mistake again." Her eyes moved to Lila. "And because I see you're finally building a life worth protecting. About time, nephew." Over the following days, Margaret proved herself sharp as her eyes suggested. She helped draft legal documents that would hold up in any court, suggested improvements that would benefit everyone, and slowly, carefully, built bridges with her estranged nephew. "She's lonely," Lila observed, watching Margaret teach a young girl from town how to embroider. "All that money, but no one to share it with." "She made her choices," Boone said, but his tone had gentled toward his aunt. "People can change. Families can heal." Lila touched the locket at her throat. "Sometimes it just takes time and courage." That evening, she found Margaret on the porch, watching sunset paint the mountains rose and gold. "You're good for him," the older woman said without preamble. "He's got his father's stubborn streak and his mother's tender heart, dangerous combination without someone to balance it. He's good for me, too." "I can see that. You've got the look of someone who's found safe harbor after storms." Margaret studied her with those penetrating eyes. "When's the wedding?" Lila blushed. "We haven't, that is, things are still—" "Child, I'm 73 years old. I don't have time for courting dances. You love him." "Yes." "He loves you." "Yes." "Then what's to wait for tomorrow's not promised to anyone?" She stood, smoothing her skirts. "I'll be staying another week. Plenty of time for a proper celebration." As if her words were prophecy. Boone found Lila by the well that night. Full moon turned everything silver, and the night breathed soft around them. "Been thinking," he said. hands in his pockets like a schoolboy, about what we're building here. Not just the ranch or the cooperative, but he pulled out a small box, worn velvet that had seen better days. This was my mother's, been waiting for the right woman to wear it. Inside lay a simple gold band, worn smooth by years of work and love. Not fancy, but honest, like everything else at Thunder Rim. I'm not good at pretty speeches, Boone continued. But I know I want to wake up every morning knowing you're there. Want to build something that lasts, not just fences and water rights, but family, home. Will you marry me, Lila? She touched the locket, that old weight of memory. Then, deliberate as anything she'd ever done, she reached back and unclasped it. The silver oval lay in her palm, catching moonlight. Yes, she said simply, and placed the locket on the porch rail. The past, acknowledged but no longer carried. Yes to all of it. He slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit like it had been waiting for her. When they kissed, it tasted of promise and permanence and all the mornings yet to come. The wedding happened 3 days later, simple as everything else at Thunder Rim. The whole town came, differences set aside for celebration. Agnes Whitlow made the cake, Tom Henderson played fiddle, and Margaret Calder wiped tears she'd deny later. Sheriff Tate officiated, reading words about partnership and perseverance that rang true in this hard land. When he asked if anyone objected, there was a moment of held breath, but Seth was just shadows now, without power to darken this day. You may kiss your bride, Tate said, grinning. Boone did, thorough and tender, while the crowd whooped approval. When they parted, Lila's eyes were bright with tears and laughter both. Look at that, Dusty said to no one in particular. Ranch finally got its heart back. The celebration lasted until stars crowned the sky, dancing on boards laid over the yard, eating under lanterns strung from posts, sharing stories and songs in the simple joy of community. Even Mason Pike's shadow couldn't dim it, though news came that he'd filed protests about the water cooperative. Let him file, Tom Henderson said, brave with wedding whiskey. We got legal standing now, and money to fight. He can't break us apart anymore. As the evening wound down, Lila found herself by the kitchen window, looking out at the transformed yard. Tomorrow it would be work again, there would be legal battles. Maybe Seth to face if he ever found courage to come himself. Certainly more attempts by the railroad to claim what wasn't theirs. But tonight, there was music and laughter and the solid warmth of Boone's arm around her waist. Tonight, Thunder Rim Ranch glowed with life and promise. Happy, he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. More than I knew was possible. Good, because I plan to keep you that way. Mrs. Calder. Mrs. Calder. The name sat strange, but right on her shoulders, like a dress that needed wearing to fit perfect. She turned in his arms, looking up at this man who'd given her sanctuary and respect and love in equal measure. Dance with me again. Every day if you want. They rejoined the celebration, moving together to Dusty's harmonica, playing something slow and sweet. Around them, their community, for that's what it was now. Not just neighbors, but family chosen and forged through trials celebrated the victory of hope over hardship. Margaret stayed another week as promised, helping establish the cooperative's legal framework and teaching Lila recipes from the Calder family cookbook. Before she left, she pressed a bank draft into Boone's hands. For the children, she said firmly, when they come, and they will come. Now this ranch has a heart again. She climbed into the stage with the dignity of a queen, waving once before disappearing in a cloud of dust toward Santa Fe. But her investment remained not just money, but the bridges rebuilt between past and future. A month later, when rain came gentle and steady for 3 days straight, Lila stood on the porch she'd scrubbed and painted, watching the land drink deep. The garden bloomed, the new well ran clear, and somewhere in the distance, a train whistle sounded, but it was just passing through, not stopping to steal what generations had built. Come inside, Boone called from the kitchen. Coffee's ready. She went, hanging her shawl on the peg by the door, moving through the house that truly felt like home now. The locket sat on the dresser in their bedroom, silver bright from polishing, holding memories without holding her prisoner. Sometimes she opened it, looking at her mother's face and remembering the strength that got her here. But she no longer wore it like armor against the world. In the kitchen, yellow curtains caught morning light. Coffee waited, strong and honest. Her husband, the word still thrilled, smiled as she entered, and she knew with certainty solid as the mountains that this was where she belonged. Thunder Rim Ranch stood against the endless sky, no longer lonely but alive with purpose, and in its heart, two people who'd found each other across miles and years of running built something worth staying for one board, one meal, one chosen day at a time. The water ran clear, the fences held strong, and love, patient as rain after drought, blessed the land with plenty. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about this tale of love and redemption in the Old West. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night, hit that like button, and don't forget to click the hype button to help more people discover these stories of courage, hope, and second chances. Your support means the world and helps keep these tales of the frontier alive. Until next time, partners.